I'm Caden, here with my brother,
Cal,
and you're watching Eating W's.
eat the W.
That's a W. Let's eat one. Let's eat one. That's a W.
On today's episode of Eating W's, we have our 2024 NFL Week 2 prediction episode. Before we get going, just a quick reminder from last episode that if the audio sounds a little weird, it's because our microphones died and we don't have the time to charge them. But we'll make sure to get them charged up and make sure everything is ready to go next week and sounding just like it should. But as for this week, just thank you for dealing with the little bit of audio change. But now to get going into the actual episode, before we get to our predictions, just a quick update on Cal and I's head-to-head pick'em game. Reminder of the score quick, since it's only week 2, the way we score it is each game is worth 1 point except for 3 total games of our choosing. Each week we will pick a game of the week, which is worth 2 points if you get that right. And each week Cal and I will each have a lock and an upset, which will be worth 2 points each if we get those games right. So in this last episode, or in this first week, I should say, Cal and I actually end in a tie of a score of 10-10. Neither of us hit our lock or our upset, with both of us locking in the Bengals and the Bengals getting dismantled, really, by the New England Patriots at home. But Callan did hit the game of the week, but on the other side of the coin, I got a couple of more head-to-head games correct. So in a 2 different paths of getting there, we each start with 10. Let's see if we can differentiate that score and break the tie here in week 2, starting with the Thursday night football game of the Buffalo Bills heading to Miami to take on the Dolphins. And we start by agreeing, so we will not be breaking the tie on Thursday night. We both have the Miami Dolphins in this one. Now, this one is more than anything pretty well a coin flip to me. So I more just went with history repeating itself. Last year, the Dolphins came out hot in their season, and the Bills didn't come out cold by any means, but not what they should have been or not what people were expecting them to be. But earlier in the season, the Dolphins actually pretty well pounded the Bills, if I remember correctly. I think they beat them by a good little score in Miami when they faced earlier in the season. But then on the other side of the page, later in the season, when the Miami Dolphins were on a little bit of a downtick, the Bills were able to take them out. So I say history repeating itself on there because I think that the Dolphins come out now that they're a little earlier in the season and starting at Hard Rock Stadium and kind of impose their will on the Bills. And I'm not going to say blowout by any means. I think it's an entertaining game and maybe a close one, but I could see the Dolphins winning by double digits, a good 10, 14 points in this one, just because it's how they did last year. I think that they started a little rusty last week and are going to look much better, considering even starting a little rusty, they still picked up a win against a good team in the Jacksonville Jaguars. So really a coin flip here. I could easily see it going either way, but for now I have the Dolphins.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a really good divisional matchup for this first Thursday night football. I like the Dolphins in this one because it's early on in the season and they're that track team still. They're going to be able to speed past the Buffalo Bills defenders, who are very young and up and coming. And the veteranness of Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are just going to be able to overtake the Bills defense. Now, Josh Allen can always play his hero ball and take over the game and possibly win this one. But I don't think he can do it 2 weeks in a row. Not the way that he had to do it against the Cardinals, where he was responsible for all 4 of the Buffalo Bills touchdowns. So I think that the Dolphins win this one in a back and forth matchup. Like you said, it kind of a shootout. But I think it's going to be an exciting one to watch, and I expect the Dolphins to win this one.
I like it. So now moving on to Sunday games, starting with the Vikings and their home opener. We have the San Francisco 49ers heading to Minnesota to take on the Vikings. And here is our chance to break the tie. We disagree. Callan has the 49ers, and I am sticking with the Vikings in this one. Do I have confidence in the Vikings? Not yet. They looked very, very good last week. I was a little skeptical heading into the season. I always try to keep some confidence, always try to keep some high hopes with them. But even I did not expect them to look quite as good against the Giants as they did. They were truly firing on all cylinders. All of the new players that had some question marks floating around them came out and really proved themselves and established themselves, at least against a lesser team with the Giants in week 1 there. But if you want to talk about going from a warm-up to a real test, this is it. I mean, the Niners last week didn't even have Christian McCaffrey, and they still absolutely dismantled the New York Jets. They just looked dominant. So there's no more of a test than this right here. It's your home opener. The lights are on. The stage is set. If you want to prove yourself on a new team, this is how you do it, is by going out and performing against the 49ers. How many of the players will do it? That's fully up in the air right now. Anyone can sit here and throw out predictions, and they will all be 50-50 chance. Is it Schrodinger's box that everything is a 50-50 chance? It either happens or it will happen, or it does happen or doesn't happen. That's really what the whole Vikings team is right now, with how many new players there are and how many new systems there are floating around there. But the Niners, not much more to say about them. They are just a good team. Man, would it be awesome if Christian McCaffrey could maybe just sit out one more week, just really let his injury heal. I wouldn't mind that at all. But even without Christian McCaffrey, they are a really good team. And I'm going to stick with the Vikings just because I always do. But nervous is the least I can say.
Well, hey, if you look at it last year when San Francisco had made a visit to Minnesota, the Vikings upset them.
Yep.
And it was one of Brock Purdy's worst career games. So maybe Minnesota and Brian Flores know something on how to beat Brock Purdy and get in his head. We'll have to see how that defense, the Vikings defense, reacts to the 49ers offense, whether that is that's with Brock Purdy, and whether that is with Christian McCaffrey or not. They still have Jordan Mason, who ran all over that Jets defense, who is thought to be pretty stout at one time, and he went over 150 yards last night. So Jordan Mason is no running back to joke with. He's definitely that big bruiser running back. He was just bullying those guys in New York, or against New York. But so now San Francisco might have a bit of a two-headed monster once Christian McCaffrey comes back, because we know what kind of weapon Christian McCaffrey is. And one of the key things here is going to be how well that 49ers defense plays. And if they're able to slow down Sam Darnold, who's had a hot start last week and played really well. Now, Sam Darnold was the San Francisco 49ers backup last year. So Kyle Shanahan knows how to get in Sam Darnold's head because he had to coach with him. So we'll see how that 49ers defense is able to shut him down. And Fred Warner is one of the best linebackers in the NFL.
That guy's just so good.
he took over that game last night on defense. I saw him make just about every damn defensive play, or he was at least near it, if not being a part of it. So hats off to him, and I think that he's an early candidate for Defensive Player of the Year.
Sam Darnold revenge game. I did not even think about it until right now.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, still absolutely petrified, but a fun storyline to look at. Now moving on to another NFC North team in their home opener, we have the Indianapolis Colts heading to Green Bay to take on the Packers, and someone not sticking with their team, as we both agree and we both have the Indianapolis Colts in this one. Now, of course, the real reason we have the Indianapolis Colts in this one is Malik Willis will be the Packers starter next week if the Packers know what's good for him and don't try to do anything stupid or dumb with Jordan Love, but very, very unlikely Malik Willis is going to end up being their starter for week 2. So that's really the real reason. I mean, we could pretty much move on after that.
Mm-hmm.
Malik Willis has had far from the best track record so far in the NFL, and I don't think after only being with the Packers for
3 weeks.
Even a month, not even a month, 3 weeks. I don't think this is the time that he comes out and beats the Colts.
That's why I think they go with Sean Clifford. I don't know.
I can see it.
Because he's been in the system for over a year.
I think right now you're just taking the upside. I know Sean Clifford's definitely the higher floor. He's safer. But I think you kind of feel like you're playing with house money. You're kind of so far against the tide that you're taking the upside. But I agree with them throwing Willis in there. You traded for him, see what he can do. If he completely falls apart, then throw Sean Clifford in and let him finish out the game. But yeah, more than I think the Colts are going to win this game, which don't get me wrong, they looked really good against the Texans last week. They truly did. But more than I think the Colts are going to win this game, I think the Packers are just still going to be a little too far in the reeling from that injury to win the game.
Yeah, it's definitely a gut punch to the whole Packers team morale. You lose your starting quarterback. Any team that loses their starting quarterback isn't going to be very good the next week. Just more times than not, there's really a backup quarterback crisis. There's not many teams that are prepared to lose their starting quarterback. You kind of got some guys that they're rookies that maybe, but there's not many out there that could step in and perform to the level of a starting quarterback, because once they do, they become a starting quarterback. So that's why there's not many good backups out there. And we'll have to see how well Malik Willis or Sean Clifford plays. Unfortunately, I do think the Colts do win this one because Anthony Richardson really looked to be able to play the part. He had a good game against that Texans defense, which I thought would be a lot better. And he had a big touchdown, and he was making big plays and big throws to Josh Doolin, Josh Doolin, and not A.D. Mitchell. Adonai Mitchell. Michael Pittman.
Yeah, Michael.
Yeah, Michael
I'm
Pittman.
trying to think of what his last name is.
Yeah.
Is it Dolan? No, I think it's Doolin. I think there's a
Yeah,
in there.
they had a deep one.
Him, that guy.
Yeah. And Alec Pierce and Josh Downs. That's the other one I was thinking
Wow,
of.
they actually have a pretty
They
damn
have
good
they have a
receiving
really
corps.
deep receiving room.
I
It's
never
really
realized
young.
that until right now.
So it's actually reminiscent of the Packers because it's deep and young. So it'll really be a good matchup this week for the Packers wide receivers and Colts wide receivers. I think that they both ball out. They both ball out and play really well. It'll be interesting to see which Packers receiver steps up this week. Because like I said, I think that each week a different one will show up. And now it'll be hard to see which one does because I don't know how much passing Malik Willis will do. I'm expecting a lot of zone read and option plays, kind of a college offense maybe. So we'll see how that does against the Colts defense, which is kind of run of the mill, nothing too spectacular, but not bottom of the barrel. They got some really good players in Zaire Franklin and Kenny Moore. So they definitely have some playmakers on defense. So we'll have to work our way around them and see how well Malik Willis is able to answer the call to be the Green Bay Packers starting quarterback.
Yeah, look for a big game by Kenny Moore. Even you want to date back a little bit into last year and this preseason and week 1, of course, that man has been balling out. God, he's looked good recently. So now moving on to a couple of quick ones we want to talk about just because we each have an upset in them. Starting with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers heading to Detroit to take on the Lions. And we actually agree and both have the Bucs in this one, but Callan has them marked as his upset.
And I like the Bucs here because of Baker Mayfield, who is turning out to be the better quarterback. Maybe if Cleveland had just stuck with him instead of bailing out for Deshaun Watson, who was taking a year off getting massages. Instead, they could have stuck with Baker Mayfield, who finally matured and is turning out to be quite the damn good starting quarterback. He's actually the number 1 fantasy quarterback right now.
Most touchdowns in
the league. So it was his 5th career game with 4 career touchdowns last week, or with 4 passing touchdowns last week. So really, I expect him to continue that role, and I expect him to have maybe an MVP caliber season because Baker Mayfield, when he reaches his true potential, is unstoppable, and he's one of those players that can take over games and win them by himself. He can play that hero ball that I talk about, and he doesn't do it quite as often as Josh Allen, but he definitely has the capabilities of doing it, and I like the Bucs to upset the Lions in this one.
Yeah, he doesn't have the capabilities of Josh Allen or the true experience and brains of Matthew Stafford, but he definitely does hero ball out of pure competitiveness. God, that guy is a competitor. He's got that fire lit under his ass constantly. And I couldn't agree more. I think the Lions are a really good team. They get another game here in the Ford Field, in the Dome. or in Detroit rather. And I could easily see them winning this game. I mean, no doubt about it.
Mhm.
But I do have the Bucks here because I truly think there is a chance that Baker Mayfield comes in and says, you know what? Why not me? Why not me to be one of the best quarterbacks in the league? He was a first overall draft pick. He held the rookie touchdown record for, I think, literally like 1 year, maybe 2 years. But he did hold it for a little bit. But nonetheless, he has just, I love the word you use, matured. I think that's such a good word for it. We talked a lot about him, I think it was a couple weeks ago, but just what he's really been able to do since becoming a Buccaneer has been so fun to watch. And I'm really happy to see him finally be comfortable and finally be getting some of the praise and success that this guy deserves. Because, God, I love a good competitor, and he is that to a T. So now moving on to another game with a upset. We have the Los Angeles Rams heading to Arizona to take on the Cardinals in an NFC East divisional matchup. And we do agree again and both have the Cardinals, but just like last time, I have them marked as my upset. And just like last week, I have them marked as my upset. I thought that they looked so good last week, even though they weren't able to pick up the win. It did bite me a little bit. But now, instead of having to travel all the way across the country pretty much to go face a really good team in the Buffalo Bills, they face certainly a good team, but maybe not quite as good of a team as the Bills at home in a divisional matchup, which are always toss-ups. I mean, you could have the worst team in the league versus the best team in the league, and you'll still see them win just because those divisional matchups are so sporadic, so much competitiveness, so much history between these teams. But nonetheless, I thought that the Cardinals looked really good. Look for a big game by Marvin Harrison because he is another guy that's a huge competitor and a really talented wide receiver. So when he goes out and has his big debut and everyone thinks we're going to see the huge breakout party from Marvin Harrison, and then he goes 1 catch for 4 yards, I mean, that weighs on you. He thinks about that. He's going to be thinking about that all week. So now he gets his first home opener in front of his home team crowd. He gets his first divisional game. What better time to come out there and just go off for like 150 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. So will it happen? Probably not because I said it. But man, would it be cool to see. And nonetheless, I think the Cardinals can pull off a win even if he doesn't do that.
Yeah, you know, the NFC West always just beats themselves up. On paper, the Rams should dominate this matchup, but really, I like the Cardinals in this one because Kyler Murray has really played very well against Buffalo. And he wasn't able to pull off the comeback and play the hero ball, but he did play very well with touchdowns to Michael Wilson and Greg Dortch. So he definitely has weapons in Arizona. And as soon as he gets that connection timed up with Marvin Harrison, look out because the Cardinals could be an offensive firepower. And I like the Cardinals to win this one because not only because of that, but also the running back, James Conner. You talk about competitors, he is one of those guys, just a fierce competitor, always, hard-nosed, running the ball. He had almost 100 yards, or maybe, did he go over 100?
I gotta imagine. I think
he got
did.
really close if he
imagine
did.
yeah.
If he didn't, because he played really well against Buffalo too. And I expect the Cardinals to be able to run all over the Rams just like the Lions did last week. And look for the Cardinals to score a nice upset in this one.
Yeah, maybe even a big, huge breakout game by Trey McBride, who played pretty well last week as well, because the middle of that Rams defense with those linebackers and safeties, it's by no means its strong point. So that's really where a tight end can take over. So now moving on to what we have marked as the game of the week this week. We have the historical matchup at this point, which is kind of weird to say, but it's happened so many times, of the Cincinnati Bengals heading to Kansas City to take on the Chiefs. And we both agree here. We both have the Chiefs. I think this might end up not being a game of the week. I think it might not end up being that good of a game. If the Bengals aren't able to shake off whatever they had on them last week against the Patriots, and if the Chiefs can continue the dominant play like they did against a really good team in the Baltimore Ravens, this one's just not even going to be a competition if those two things happen. If the same two teams that played in week 1 show up in this game and the Chiefs are at home, it's literally going to be like a 30 to 40 point differential. It's going to be crazy. Do I think that's going to happen? No. I think that the Chiefs will play as well, but I think the Bengals step up and kind of brush off the woes of week 1 and that loss to the New England Patriots. But nonetheless, even if they return to prime Bengals, 2021 Super Bowl Bengals, I still think that the way that the Chiefs played in week 1 and that key that they had to unlock their offense is the speed of Xavier Worthy. So look for him to have another really big game, especially with Jetsy Bates not there playing center fielder in Cincinnati anymore. So I look for a huge game with the deep ball for the Chiefs, just like they used to do back in prime 2021 Chiefs. But nonetheless, a pretty cut and dry win by Kansas City.
Yeah, I expect the Chiefs to win this one. I actually think this will be closer than people think, because as bad as Cincinnati played last week, there's always a team every year. It's a Jekyll and Hyde, and they go every other week where they show up one week and disappear the next. And maybe the Cincinnati Bengals are this year's Jekyll and Hyde team. And I bet that if they are, they show up this week and in the Burrowhead, and Joe Burrow shows why he owns Arrowhead, and he surprises the Chiefs and maybe gets that connection going with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, if T. Higgins is able to come back and play. But with T. Higgins out, they really seem to be shaky in that wide receiver room. With Jamar Chase not being there for most of training camp in the preseason, he really is still kind of shaking off the rust. So if T. Higgins still doesn't play, I expect the Chiefs to win this one. But the more I'm thinking about it, I almost want to change my pick, but I'll stick with the Chiefs to win this one by a field goal.
Yeah, I think it's safer to go them. I do like the Jekyll and Hyde point, though, because the Bengals have the roster to do it. They got lots of talents in some places and almost no talent in a lot of other places. So now moving on to our final 2 games of this week, the primetime games, starting with Sunday Night Football. We have the Chicago Bears heading down to Houston to take on the Texans. And we agree again here. We both have the Texans, and I actually have them as my lock. I think that this matchup was penciled in by the schedule makers when they were still eating up that preseason hype of the Chicago Bears and the Houston Texans as well. Because this matchup, I don't think, should have really been a week 2 Sunday Night Football matchup. I mean, Caleb Williams was able to pick up a win in his first game last week, but it was not Caleb Williams who won that game. It was the defense far and away. And I think that the defense is not going to be able to hold this very, very talented Houston Texans offense. And on the other side of the page with this matchup, I don't think that offense is going to be able to do anything against this Texans defense with guys like Derek Stingley Jr. and Will Anderson out there. So this is another one where if everything falls the way it looked last week, I think we could see a 30 to 40 point differential. Again, same story. I don't think that will happen, but nonetheless, I still see the Texans winning pretty handily.
Yeah, I really like the Texans in this one. Caleb Williams was really underwhelming. He was under 100 yards, had a pick. He didn't look comfortable till the end, and that was only because they were winning. He didn't really do anything spectacular, anything to write home about. He had a solid connection with Keenan Allen, which I think is going to be very important for the Bears for the Bears games, or they do win. I think that Keenan Allen will have a big game, but I don't expect that to be this week. With the Houston Texans being able to just really score at will, with whether that's with Nico Collins in the deep ball or their newfound running game and Joe Mixon, who the Bengals are sure missing. But Joe Mixon has found a new home in Houston, and he went over 100 yards last week, and I expect him to go over 100 again and be able to run all over that Chicago Bears defense, where that's the weak point is of the Bears, is that rush defense, where maybe the Texans won't be able to air it out as much against that secondary, but I expect Joe Mixon to maybe be the player of the game this week.
Joe Mixon had a sneaky good week last week. He was more than over 100 yards. I want to say he was at like 150 some, maybe even up to like 170. He had a crazy good week last week. So now to close out our week 2 predictions for the 2024 NFL season, we have the Monday Night Football game of the Atlanta Falcons heading to Philadelphia to take on the Eagles in a matchup of the Birds. And we end this week by agreeing again. We both have the Eagles in this one. I just think that the Eagles are way too good pretty much because of Saquon Barkley and that offensive line. I think that they still have a very good receiving corps. Don't get me wrong at all, with guys like A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and now Jahan Dotson, who's kind of really starting to learn that offense more. But I think Jalen Hurts just isn't elite enough of a pocket passer, of a true quarterback, to take full advantage of that receiving corps like he should. But that doesn't matter when you have a guy like Saquon Barkley in the backfield, because that defense is going to be so worried about stopping that workhorse that wide receivers are going to be running wide open left and right, even if they were terrible. But guess what? The Eagles receivers aren't terrible. So it's kind of a little bit of pick your poison for the Atlanta Falcons defense right now. And they just surely do not have the talent and do not have the depth of players to be able to pick the right thing. They're going to pick their poison, and it's always going to be the wrong thing. The only player on their team that's really, truly elite, I'd say, is A.J. Terrell, maybe Jesse Bates, but he's getting a little older. So I just, more than anything in this game, I see the Eagles offense just being far too much for the Falcons defense to take any care of, and the Falcons offense not being able to keep up on the other side of the ball.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Eagles do win this one, but I expect this one to be maybe a bit of a shootout, because I expect to see primetime Kirko Chains making his first appearance in Atlanta. And he had kind of a lackluster game to start out his career. It was kind of early for him. It was a noon game, so this is new primetime Kirk. He'll be ready and raring to go. I expect him to have a really big game and duel it out with Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley. But I think that the Eagles just have too much firepower for the Falcons to keep up. Because with A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Saquon Barkley, as I saw firsthand last week, that is quite the trio, and quite a powerful trio to try to stop, and it's just damn near impossible to try to stop all three of them. Maybe you can stop one of them, but you can't focus on all three of them.
You really can't. It's truly just pick your poison. We talked a little bit before this episode started on, is primetime Kirk and Kirko Chains more prominent in Minnesota or more in Atlanta? And you got to imagine Kirko Chains just fits in more down in Atlanta, but we'll have to see. We're going to find out nice and early in the season on Monday. But thank you all so much for watching. That is our predictions for week 2 of the 2024 NFL season. Make sure you stay tuned until next week when we have our week 2 recap and week 3 predictions. But until then, don't forget
to eat the W.